Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. In this episode of Love and Abuse, I want to cover the topic of other people controlling how you feel. I received an email recently that said, it's interesting to me how you keep talking about allowing others to, quote, make me feel. I can't imagine something more poisonous than buying into the idea that others can control how I feel, that others have a magic button to control what goes on inside of me. And he says, I think it's important to understand how we feel is something inside of us. It is something we can control, that we should never give our power to others. I totally agree. I think that we should never give our power to others. And unfortunately, I've seen way too many instances where somebody can indirectly control how we feel. I realize that is a disempowering statement. I realize that there are people right now saying that's not true. I can choose how I feel. I can choose my responses. I can choose my behavior. I can choose my emotions, and I have free will. And all of the above is yes and. Yes, you can. And there are other people that know how to push your buttons. There are other people that know buttons that you don't know you have. There are other people that know how to communicate in a way to make you make decisions that you wouldn't have necessarily made had it not been for them. And we could go back and say, well, if you're in that type of situation where someone is communicating in a poisonous way, then you need to see that poisonous communication and check in with yourself and make sure that you aren't making decisions based on bad information. People might tell you that. If they're being a bad person or they're showing you toxic behavior, then you should just get away from them. Yes, and. Yes, I agree with that. And it's not always easy because sometimes you don't know if they're showing toxic behavior. And sometimes it's not always a matter of just leaving and everything will be okay. Sometimes there are obligations and responsibilities, or there are moments in relationships where someone is being toxic 1% of the time, and the rest of the time they're fine. I'm not saying a relationship has to end because there's toxic behavior. In fact, I think it's good to work on relationships until you're exhausted trying to work on them, trying to save it, trying to grow with each other. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and then maybe you have to move on. But what I'm talking about right now is poisonous communication that makes you think things, feel things, and do things that aren't necessarily under your control. How is that possible? Is this brainwashing? What is going on? What do you mean? I'm talking to myself. What I mean is that I have been witness to, and I have talked with clients and have been victim to coercive behavior that made me do or say things that I would not have done had I not been manipulated in some way. And because that behavior came from me, because I initiated it, I was the one who took action on it, as far as doing something that I would not have done or said otherwise had it not been for another person, because I was the one who did it, I will start not trusting my instincts. I will start not trusting my decision making. And because of that, I am now more susceptible to manipulative behavior, to coercion, to emotionally abusive behavior. Because the person who was able to get me to doubt myself now has their foot in the door even more. And over the days, weeks, months, and years this happens, pretty soon they have full access to all my decision-making abilities, and I have lost complete trust in myself. What I'm describing is a typical emotionally abusive relationship where the breakdown of your own will, of your own confidence, of your own surety in yourself is exactly what creates the behavior I'm talking about, where you can be controlled. Because there can be a point where you're so broken down that your psyche is so disintegrated that you cannot trust yourself anymore, that the only person that you can trust is the one that is doing the controlling. Because you are so instilled with my main point today, doubt. You are so instilled with doubt. And the manipulative, controlling person does one thing very, very well, and that is instill doubt. And a lot of the clients that I've talked to that have survived emotionally abusive or manipulative relationships, they went into the relationships absolutely confident in themselves, absolutely sure of who they were, had no problems making decisions, and then they met someone who was an expert at breaking down their emotional state. And it all started with a seemingly innocent comment. It usually all starts with some seemingly innocent comment. Not always, but a lot of the times it starts with something that just sounds a little benign. And that could be something as simple as, "No, you didn't say that. This is what you said." To instill that little bit of doubt. And that's all it takes. Just that first moment that someone who's so sure of themselves and has developed a trusting, loving bond with someone, that when that person that they have grown to love and trust says something like, "No, you didn't say that. This is what you said," that is the first of many times that the victim of manipulation or emotional abuse is going to start questioning their own behavior, their own decisions, their own memory. And then this continues and repeats over time. Of course, the secret is, if you are very aware of emotional abuse and very aware of controlling behavior that is designed to instill doubt in you, then of course you can make the choice to go, "Whoa, you just instilled doubt in me. That's not right." But it's such a gray area, isn't it? Haven't we all forgotten something at one time or another? Using this example, like, "That's not what you said." Haven't we all heard that at one time or another? And especially to hear it from someone that we already trust and already love. And the argument might be, well, maybe you shouldn't trust them 100%. That's very hard to do when you become vulnerable with someone that has earned your trust and has done nothing to prove otherwise, that they aren't trustworthy. This is how the typical emotional abusive relationship starts, is that you're with someone that earns your trust, proves they're trustworthy, proves they're kind, supportive, loving, and will do anything for you. There's no reason not to trust what they say. They have set you up to fail. That failure is the continuing disintegrating of your self-trust, self-confidence, self-esteem, self-worth, that continuing breakdown of everything you feel good about in yourself. And that breakdown happens over a period of days, weeks, months, and years, until you get to the point where you have no choice but to trust the only other person that you feel like you can trust, which is the person being abusive or manipulating or controlling. And at that point, you are definitely in a space where someone can make you feel anything they want. And I know this, again, is not good news. This is not happy news. But this is one of the reasons why I cannot find enough professional help in the world for narcissistic abuse, for emotional abuse. If you look for therapists that specialize in these things, they're far and few between. They're very hard to find. And one of the reasons for that, I feel, is because of the belief that no one can make us feel anything. I might be saying something very controversial here, because there are probably philosophers and even neuroscientists out there that might say, that's not true. We can choose to feel anything we want to feel. We can choose to respond any way we want to respond. I want to believe that, but I've seen too many instances where that's simply not true. And people might argue that when you first experience that manipulative or controlling behavior or action, that's when you catch it. I agree. Yes, and. Yes, that is when you can catch it. When you feel confident in yourself and then someone says something that makes you lose some confidence in yourself, you can absolutely catch it if you know what you're looking for. If you realize what's happening, if you're willing to let go of your 100% faith and trust in the person doing it, because that's what it involves. That is a choice. I agree. But what happens if someone in your life, think of someone in your life that you trust 100%, if you can. Some people can't. If you can, think of someone you 100% trust, respect, will support you. If they said, no, that's not what you said, this is what you said. Or no, you didn't put the dishes away, I did. If they said something like that, you're probably going to believe them. And you're probably going to, instead of question what they're saying because you trust them, you're probably going to question yourself instead. And yes, I agree, that's still a conscious choice. That is still a choice you're making. But it's a cleverly disguised manipulation. It is so clever that it bypasses our critical filter. It gets beyond it. This is the point where someone can make us feel how they want us to feel. And most of us don't go around in life with our guard up looking for this type of behavior because most of us, or a lot of us, haven't seen it before, have never experienced it before. It's like picking a flower and not knowing it's poisonous and then breaking out in a rash. We don't know what we don't know. And therefore, in my opinion, people can control how we feel because we don't know what they're doing to us. Someone like myself, I've been studying this for years. And in fact, I come from the other side of it. I've talked about this in an earlier episode. I come from the emotionally abusive side. I was emotionally abusive toward my wife. I know some of the tricks. I know what I was doing. I didn't call it emotional abuse back then. I didn't call it a trick. To me, it felt normal to be the way I was. And that's scary. It was scary looking at it now, but it felt normal to be the way I was because all she had to do was change and everything would be better in our relationship. Those were normal thoughts for me. And I did things in a way like withhold love because of using the silent treatment, being judgmental, making her feel bad, making her feel guilty. And again, someone's going to stop me and say, you can't make her feel bad. You can't make her feel guilty. I know there are people out there that believe that. And until you experience it for yourself, that breakdown of your self-worth, that breakdown of the self-confidence and self-love, self-compassion, all these breakdowns, and especially self-trust. Once you break that down, you've bypassed their critical filters. You've tackled and knocked out their guard, their defense, and you are now inside their brain. I make it sound insidious. It is. I make it sound impossible to fight or resist or even know it's coming. Sometimes. Until you listen to a show like this, until you understand what's happening, until you realize that the person you were is being altered. And this is where you can knock up your awareness a lot. You can kick it up a notch. And what I mean is, if you were always confident and sure of yourself, or at least most of the time, and you trusted your own decisions and you were able to take action and feel good about that action and even fail and still feel like, okay, I failed, let's move on to the next thing, but you never became overly doubtful in your decisions or overly untrusting of how you think and what you do. If that was never there and then you met someone and suddenly it was there, that's the first sign. That's the first sign. The second sign is something more specific, which is when someone instills doubt in you. This is a little gray area because people do it all the time very innocently. Somebody saying, hey, that's not what you said this, could be an absolutely true statement. I want you to look for the patterns though. Has it happened more than once? Does it seem to happen often? Do they seem to enjoy telling you that? Like it fulfills them in some way for you to have doubt in yourself. These little tiny nuances that can make the difference between an innocent comment and a series of comments that cause you to have doubt in yourself, doubt in your abilities, doubt in your decision making, doubt in your memory. If these are being instilled by someone else, yes, it's time to wake up. It is. It is time to wake up to what's happening, because you are probably being entranced to believe this stuff because the person developed a relationship with you and they earned your trust. So look for that pattern of instilling doubt. Another thing you want to look for is when they don't seem to support you being happy, they actually seem to support and push you toward feeling bad about yourself. That is a huge, huge red flag of emotional abuse. If someone is not only instilling doubt in your own abilities, but they're also making you feel bad about yourself, like, you shouldn't do that, you're going to hurt the kids. Or one that I heard the other day of, I can't believe you don't get along with your sister. I don't know if I can be with someone who can't get along with their family. It was just an odd comment. But what it does is instill doubt in the person being told this because, well, maybe I'm doing something wrong. I mean, I thought I was doing this because that family member was toxic, but if he's telling me this, maybe he's right. He seems to be right about a lot of other things, and I trust him. And it's also making the person feel bad about themselves, about their own decisions. I mean, that might be a minor example or a major one if you've ever experienced this. But these little comments that are part of a bigger picture of the disintegration of who you are all part of a bigger machine of control. And once you start believing all these things about yourself that are being instilled in you, then more and more control comes into your life, and you'll have less and less power in your life. And so this person who wrote the email, who says, I can't imagine something more poisonous than buying into the idea that others can control how I feel, I am with you. I don't like buying into that idea. And maybe you can't. Maybe you can't buy into that. And, you know, the reason that people say, yes, we are in control of our feelings, it is to keep our power. It is to give us something to hold on to, that no matter what happens in our life, we still have us. We are still whole inside. We are still in control of ourselves. But I wouldn't have this show if that were 100% true, because there are people that aren't in control because somebody has found a way in. Somebody can find a way in. They look for vulnerabilities. Believe me, sometimes relationships start with someone gathering data on you for months. They're asking questions. They're looking for anything they can eventually use against you. This does happen. And the worst part is, if you've never experienced any type of manipulation or control like this, you're going to miss it. It's easy to miss. And if you miss it, then you could get sucked into that kind of toxic relationship. And again, the signs I told you to look for, that's how you can tell. When someone's starting to make you feel bad, when someone's instilling doubt in you, look for those red flags and take a step back out of the feelings that you have and start to look at the bigger picture. Is this happening more often than it should? What's going on here? And to this person who wrote the email, this is how we can stop someone from controlling us. Even if you don't believe that anyone can control us, this is how we can prevent this. I have a feeling a lot of people that listen to this show probably haven't been able to prevent this because they never knew it existed. They never knew someone could act like that. They have empathy, but their partner or someone else in their life doesn't, or they're not using it, and they are in a situation now that their partner or whoever it is doesn't care if they're happy or not. I mean, you gotta look for these signs. Does my partner, does my mom, does my sister, does whoever care if I'm happy or not? It's a great question. Do they care if I feel good about myself? Do they care? These are the kinds of questions that keep you aware without being paranoid, without having your guard up all the time, because we want to be able to have relationships where we can be vulnerable and trusting and loving and feel loved and feel trusted with someone else. That's kind of what makes relationships work. When they don't work is when all this other stuff comes up because someone else had an agenda. And, you know, there are other signs that you can tell when any type of relationship is starting that give you a clue that this isn't right. And, you know, a lot of the stuff I talk about on this show, love bombing, gift bombing, ghosting, breadcrumbing, crazy making, gaslighting, all kinds of labels that once you get familiar with them, and you are educated, then even if you've never run into it before, now you know. Now you understand what it is. And, we get blinded by love sometimes. We're just so happy that this person fulfills everything that we want. But when we find out there's an agenda, a purpose behind them showing up as everything that we want, now we have something to look at. But I don't want this to deter you from getting into relationships and actually enjoying your time and enjoying the person that you're with, because there's so many good people out there. There's so many good people that do not do many of the things that I talk about here. It's just a matter of being aware that when you start feeling bad, it's time to start questioning. It's time to start questioning yourself. It's time to take a step back out of the feelings, out of the emotions, and look at the big picture just to understand what's happening. Doesn't automatically mean that you're with a bad person. It just means you might need to start having a conversation or two. And the question I asked earlier, do you want me to feel bad about myself? Do you want me to start doubting myself? That's a good question. I don't know how effective it'll be for the person that has an agenda, that actually does want to control you, but it is definitely a good question for yourself and to start noticing things. It's not about being paranoid when something is going great that it could just fall apart at any time. I still believe in living in the present, being with the people that you love fully, not thinking about a future that could turn into a disaster, not thinking about past relationships that were awful and now you have your guard up all the time, just enjoying what you have today. Until something happens that does raise a flag, and then you take action. Then you make decisions that are right for you so that you can stay safe and let others know that you are in control of you and no one can take away your power. To the person who wrote this email, thank you. It is a great subject. I don't know if we agree or disagree, but I'm glad you wrote this because it is a great thing to talk about and spread into the world. Share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. If you want to pinpoint the exact behaviors causing difficulties in your relationship, head over to loveandabuse.com. And if you've already purchased the Mean Workbook, there is a Facebook peer support group for you to join if you'd like to connect with others that are going through a similar circumstance as you. It is what Facebook calls a secret group, meaning no one on Facebook can tell you're a part of it. So if you'd like to join, please send an email to paul@loveandabuse.com and tell me the email you used to purchase the workbook. Once I verify it, I'll send you an invite to the group right away. Because of the nature of the group, membership is carefully monitored so that people with not so good intentions aren't allowed in, which is why we have to limit it to those who have purchased the workbook. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you are not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant because you are. Thank you for joining me today. We'll talk again soon.